I would like to call to order the special board meeting and work session at the Willoughby East Lake Board of Education. Mr. Charnell, can you please take a roll?
Mr. Boxler?
Present.
Mr. Roskis?
Here.
Mr. Vittori?
Here.
Mrs. Menser?
Here.
Mrs. Bear?
Here.
We have a quorum.
If you could please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll move to item 2, approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
Madam President, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Vittori. Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Menzer. Now for discussion. Tonight, we have our public participation policy, which restricts 3 minutes per person, 20 minutes total for public participation. I would like to make a recommendation to amend our public participation policy for tonight to allow every individual who signed up to speak to have an opportunity to speak. To do that, we kind of have to figure out whether we're going to keep the 3 minutes per person and or reduce that, or if we'll just keep 3 minutes and increase the total amount of time. So the floor is open for discussion. What do you guys want to do? How many do we have, Nick?
I think we have 12.
12? We can keep it at 3 minutes per person.
I would
Keep
say
it at
3 minutes.
Keep it 3 minutes?
Okay, we have 11.
11. So the proposed amendment to our public participation policy for this meeting would be to still give 3 minutes to each speaker and extend our time frame to include all 11 speakers, correct?
That sounds fine, right?
Okay.
Thank you.
I make a motion to approve the amendment to our public participation policy for this meeting.
Madam President, I'll make that a motion, or recommend motion to approve that.
Thank you, Mr. Vittori. Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Boxler. Mr. Charnello?
Mr. Boxler?
Yes.
Mr. Roskis?
Yes.
Mr. Vittori?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
The agenda is now amended.
Okay. So now we need to approve. So we need to make a motion to approve item 3A, public participation, with the amendment to our policy to extend our public participation to be inclusive of all 11 speakers for 3 minutes each. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Madam President, I'll make a motion to approve 3A work session mask mandate discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Vittori. Do I hear a second?
Madam President, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mrs. Menzer. Mr. Charnello?
Mr. Boxler?
Yes.
Mr. Vittori?
Yes.
Or, sorry, Mr. Roskis?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Passes 5-0. The agenda is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Charnello. So we're going to move on to public participation in our community engagement section of tonight's agenda. Because we did have an amendment to our policy, I just want to kind of just reiterate a few things that everybody in attendance who speaks and or those who are here listening and not speaking understand the policy in its entirety. So we as a board recognize the value to school governance of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on school matters of community interest. The board offers public participation to members of the public in accordance with the procedures below. This is a written policy. The board applies these procedures to all speakers and does not discriminate based on the identity of the speaker, the content of the speech, or the viewpoint of the speaker. The presiding officer of each board meeting, which is me, at which public participation is permitted, shall administer the rules of the board for its conduct. The presiding officer shall be guided by the following. Public participation shall be permitted as indicated on the order of business and at the discretion of the presiding officer. Attendees must register their intention to participate in the public participation portion of the meeting upon arrival. Individuals may not register others. Participants must first be recognized by the presiding officer and will be requested to preface their comments by an announcement of their name, address, and, if applicable, group affiliation. Each statement made by the participant shall be limited to 3 minutes in duration, unless extended. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. The presiding officer may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's session when they make comments that are repetitive, obscene, and/or comments that constitute a true threat, which are statements meant to frighten or intimidate one or more specified persons into believing that they will be seriously harmed by the speaker or someone acting at the speaker's behest. Request any individual to stop speaking and/or to leave the meeting when that person does not observe reasonable decorum or is disruptive to the conduct and/or orderly progress of the meeting. We can request the assistance of law enforcement officers in the removal of a disorderly person when that person's conduct interferes with the conduct and/or orderly progress of the meeting, or call for a recess or adjournment to another time when the lack of public decorum so interferes with the conduct, or we can waive these rules. Ultimately, we want to make sure everybody is heard tonight. That's why we made the amendments. While the participant is speaking, we ask that everybody in attendance tonight listen. No discussion amongst yourselves, so that we can also listen. When Dr. Thompson is presenting or when we are discussing, we just need an opportunity to hear everybody. If we can respect those, I know tonight we'll go and we'll represent Willoughby Eastlake in a manner that we want it to, okay? So we're just gonna make sure everyone has an opportunity. And with that, our first person, Mr. Tarnello.
Tim O'Keefe.
Good evening. My name is Tim O'Keefe. My wife and I and our family, we live at 38661 Edward Walsh Drive in Willoughby. And I'm here tonight because we happen to have a daughter who is a student in Willoughby Eastlake School.
Is the mic
mic
working?
on?
Go ahead and just give it a
Is the
tap. Or
button on?
Oh, okay, now? Yes, okay.
Much better.
feel free to begin again, sir.
All right, thank you. Hi, my name is Tim O'Keefe. My wife and I, our family, we live in Willoughby at 38661 Edward Walsh Drive. And the reason I'm here tonight is because we happen to have a daughter who's a student within the Willoughby Eastlake school system. And I'm here to advocate for the removal of the mask mandate. Again, I'd like to be clear about that. I'm here to advocate for the removal of the mask mandate. Back when this daughter was 6 years of age, she was diagnosed with leukemia. And the first thing they do, if you're familiar with leukemia, is they wipe out the immune system. So for the first 30 days in the hospital, they wiped out her immune system, and it gradually came back over the years, I'm happy to tell you. During that time, with her immune system severely suppressed, if not wiped out altogether, and coming back over the years, we never imposed our situation on anyone else. We never mandated people wear masks around her, and also we didn't ask them to get for a flu vaccination or socially distanced. But the key here tonight is we did not mandate people wear a mask around her. We did not impose her situation, our situation, on others. Which prompts me to be here tonight asking you to please remove the mask mandate from the Willoughby Eastlake school system. Those folks who wish to do whatever they think is right to protect their kid, that's perfectly fine. But we feel very clearly that the mask mandate in the Willoughby Eastlake school system should not be held in place. And thank you for this time to visit.
Thank you, Mr. O'Keefe.
Lovey McCandless. Lori McCandless.
Hi, I'm Lori McCandless at 320 Shelton Boulevard, and I have 2 kids in the district. I'm just here to ask to remove the mandate and make it optional. We've been doing this for 2 years. all the districts around us are removing it. And I got to see firsthand what these kids are wearing on their face every day. I really don't understand how any teacher or parent is allowing it. When I volunteered at my daughter's class party, I saw some of the kids' masks just sitting on their desk when they were eating. And how a teacher could even let the kid keep putting it on, I don't understand. But anyways, making it optional gives people that want to send their kids to school in a mask, they can still do that, but other people that don't want to, don't have to. And they don't have to try to come up with a reason or get an exemption approved. So I'm just asking to remove the mandate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura Stapleton.
Hello, everyone. My name is Laura Stapleton, and I live at 34212 Roberts Road. My daughter is a student at Thomas Jefferson Elementary, and as a medical professional, I truly believe that masks need to remain mandatory. At the beginning of the school year, when masks were finally made to be mandatory, the number of new cases were 2,194, with a 7-day average of 3,032. Today, the number of new cases is 5,224, with a 7-day average of 10,010. Based on this information alone, does it really make sense to not have a mask mandate? Masks have been proven to decrease exposure to vulnerable family members, and according to the CDC, there has been a dramatic increase of hospital admissions in pediatric patients with COVID. There have been a multitude of research studies that found when schools and child care programs used masks that there were markedly fewer closures related to COVID. My hope is that you are not blinded by threats of lawsuits by those who are uneducated on the facts and research. If you truly care about the safety of the students and the staff, then you will continue to enforce a mask mandate so that our children and their dedicated educators can remain safe in a classroom setting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we proceed, Mr. Chanello, I just want to remind once again, we as a group are going to respect and quietly listen to all participants. Please.
Laura Wolf.
Hello, Laura Wolf. I live at 37752 Lakeshore Boulevard in Eastlake. I have 2 kids in the district. First wanted to welcome the new board members and congratulate you guys. I'm here today to ask that you all vote to remove the mask mandate and to make it an optional choice. We're 2 years into this and I think we've learned a lot. Some things that we have learned, per the CDC, Anthony Fauci, and the World Health Organization, cloth masks do not work. Per the CDC, disposable surgical masks show limited evidence for their effectiveness in preventing the virus transmission, either when worn by an infected person for control or when worn by an uninfected person to reduce exposure. Their review found no significant effect on transmission. There are 52 studies, all available on the NIH website, that find that ordinary masking, anything less than an N95, does not reduce the viral infection rates. There's an additional 25 studies published on their website that attribute masking to cause harm, including respiratory and immune system illnesses, as well as dermatological, dental, gastrointestinal, and psychological issues. A peer-reviewed study on masks in children published by the Journal of American Medical Association confirmed that not only does masking children not prevent the spread of COVID-19, it likely increases the spread due to the increased touching of the mask, thereby increasing the viral load a child would continue to breathe in for 6 to 8 hours a day. The study also found that kids were inhaling carbon dioxide up to more than 6 times the acceptable limits for adults. Brown University completed a landmark study that stated face masks and other social distancing measures may in fact impede children's development. There was a study in UK made public by the UK Department of Education that shows the government's own research failed to prove that masks significantly reduce transmission in schools, and it also acknowledged that the use of masks could harm learning. The World Health Organization guidelines recommend against masking children under 5, doesn't routinely recommend children's ages through 6 to 11 because of the, quote, potential impact of wearing a mask on learning and psychological development. The Florida Surgeon General stated there's no substantial difference.
Ms.
Is
Wolf?
that my time?
Yes, that's your
Okay.
time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Julie O'Keefe.
Good evening, I'm Julie O'Keefe, and I live at 38661 Edward Walsh in Willoughby. I'm a mother of 5, and I have 1 child in the district. And I have a lot written here, but I'm not gonna go through all this. What I really wanna say is the pandemic is over. We've moved into endemic now, and that's why all these countries around the world are dropping their protocols. And for those of us who've done our research on this, we've known from the beginning that children are not seriously affected by this virus. And we've also learned that the virus is aerosolized, so it moves right through the mask. And that's why the CDC is now saying to wear an N95 mask, and the whole "I'm wearing a mask to protect you" narrative, that's over now. The other thing I want to do is speak on behalf of parents who have children with speech delays. We're way past the time where our children should be able to see our teachers' faces and their speech therapists' faces. We have an 11-year-old daughter who desperately needs speech therapy, and she has not seen her speech pathologist's mouth move in nearly 2 years, and I'm really angry about that. And the last thing I want to say is, when the Lake County General Health District wanted us to wear masks, this district jumped on that immediately. And now they're saying the opposite. They're saying this should be optional. This should be up to the individual parents. So I'm asking you tonight, you have an opportunity to end this tonight. So I'm asking you, please do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Fisner.
Good evening, Sarah Fisner. I'm at 33803 Lakeshore Boulevard. I'm a parent, an attorney, a business owner, and living in Willoughby East Lake District. In preparation for today, what struck me the most was how, over the years, the arguments against masking children have remained unchanged, and they are just as truthful and relevant today. The only difference now is that the majority of society, besides some schools, have come around to common sense, and the arguments are now backed by the CDC and our local health district. I know I'm on repeat with many of you because you've heard from me, but once again, I need to state the unchanged truth on this matter. First, children continue to be wholly unaffected by this virus. The number of affected children has always and continues to amount to a statistical 0, and it continues to be an abuse of the child to require them to wear a mask to protect them from a disease that has almost no chance of affecting them. Second, masking children has no effect on the spread of COVID. Any reasonably intelligent person knew this early on by just watching how they were worn and the fact that they are unsealed. But now even the CDC itself agrees. The result was that the CDC published a large-scale study on transmission of COVID in American schools, and the result was that distancing, hybrid models, classroom barriers, HEPA filters, and most notably requiring student masking were found to have no statistically significant benefit. Again, this is from the CDC. Third, masking children has a negative effect on their psyche and mental health. Again, any reasonably intelligent person knows this. This is common sense. But now there's abundant research on the risks of masking children to their mental health, communication skills, and their overall human experience. Fourth, everyone is at exponentially less risk now than originally thought. Vaccinations, antiviral medications, and treatments are available to almost anyone who wants one. Children are not a threat to anyone and should not be treated this way. And finally, allowing exemptions is not the same thing as optional masking. This has been argued by some of you and is simply not true. The truth is that many parents don't know about exemptions, they're intimidated by the process, they simply don't have time to fight this fight, or they fear that their child may be treated unfairly or discriminated against, which has been happening. Exemptions are not the same as parent choice. The school has continually used the health district as a shield, claiming that you had to follow the guidance for masking, even though you didn't. And to ignore them now that they've recommended optional masking for schools would be a hypocrisy that I don't think you could recover from. Repairing the faith of a constituency has to start from the bottom up, at the local level, and that's you. You can restore the faith of our community by voting on the recommendation of thousands of parents in the Lake County Health District for parent choice or optional masking
Mrs.
for
Spencer,
every
your
one of
3
Willoughby's
minutes is
Lake.
up. Thank you.
I hope that this time it's for good. Thank you.
Trent Gondek.
Hi, my name's Trent Gondek. I live at 38500 Dodds Landing. And I'm here to advocate for the removal of the mask mandate. You know, for a lot of the same reasons that have already been said here. My first one is logic, right? I mean, you could have the best of both worlds. If you want to wear a mask, wear 10 masks, right? If that makes you feel safe, you get vaccinated, wear your 10 masks, go to school, great. But don't, why do other people have to wear it? Just so that you can feel safe. I think we offer an online option even too, if you really don't want to come to school, there's an online option, I believe. I'm not certain on that. So yet another reason not to mandate masks. If you look at it from a data perspective, people under the age of 30, it's like, this barely touches them. And obviously all of our students are under 30, the staff not so much, but again, back to that first point, the teachers can choose to mask, they can choose to vaccinate, and they should be protected. Like I said earlier, you know, masks, and N95 works somewhat to mitigate this, but you know, not a ton. And these cloth masks that these kids wear that are nasty, worn around their chin, they're not doing anything. And some further data, the CDC just said 75% of the deaths had an average of 4 comorbidities. So COVID, maybe it's a contributing factor to their death, but an average of 4 comorbidities. And I think they said over 80% were obese. So if you're unhealthy and if you're sick, you die. COVID, not COVID, anything, that's life, okay? And then next, social cues, right? My son, he's in special ed and at Eastlake Middle, and you know, he can't see his teacher's face and his fellow students' faces to see that those nonverbal cues. He needs those nonverbal cues to communicate effectively. And he can't do that when the person's got a mask on, and not to mention their speech is muffled. I mean, hearing some of you talk up here, and it's, you know, it's just natural. Your speech can be muffled wearing a mask. So it's bad in so many regards from just a social aspect. As said, other districts are, you know, Mentor's, 2-3 times the size of us. They've dropped their mask mandate, or I don't know, Steve. I don't know
We're
numbers.
actually larger than Mentor. It's the biggest misconception there is.
I learned something. They're a gigantic district,
Yeah.
and they've dropped their mandates. And then finally, you know, when does this end? COVID's not going away. We haven't eradicated the flu. We're not going to eradicate COVID. It's not going away. You do what you can to stay healthy. Chances are you're going to get the flu. You're going to get the cold. You're going to get COVID, and there's a very, very high percentage, 99% chance that you're going to be just fine, like any other disease. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conley.
Tim Donahue.
Hi, everybody. Tim Donahue. I live at 38130 Strumbly Place, Willoughby. I had 3 adult children come through the system. I've been in the system for 30 years. And I'd just like to tell everybody this. We said the Pledge of Allegiance, and we're one nation under God. And I just want everybody to know, I prayed for all of you people to make the right decision, and I'm praying for all of you parents and guardians to make the right decisions. Under God, this nation is supposed to be. And we've been moving away. And that's why some of these decisions have been made and they're terrible. Now, I have 4 grandchildren in the system. 3 of my adult children graduated from Eastlake North. Okay? And I just want to say this, and I'm not tooting my horn. 41 years I've been in education. I'm retired now because of a lot of this crap. And I didn't want to retire yet. Taught mathematics for 35 years in the high school setting. 41 years altogether teaching mathematics at the collegiate or the high school setting. And I want to elaborate on what you said about the masks and the kids not being able to see the verbal cues. But I'm here to tell you this. As an educator, and I'm extremely passionate about it still, being retired, you can't see the kids' faces. Do you know how many kids that I saw that had horrible nights maybe at their home, and they're in your school, and you're trying to teach them? They're not going to be there to learn if they have something going on at home. You know how many times I was able to see their face and know something's wrong, and just go up to them after class, not in front of other kids to embarrass them. Johnny, are you doing okay? Is everything all right? What are you doing there? You're showing them you care. What is going on in this country? It's making me sick. Doggone it. What is education about? You know what it's about? Learning disciplines, number one, but guess what it really is? To learn how to think. Now, are we going to be a compliant nation? Huh? No. Or are we going to think?
Mr. Donahue, I understand you're passionate. We want to hear
I'll
you
calm
have to
down.
say.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
That's me. I'll settle down.
And sir, I'll give you about 10 more seconds.
I got
Time is
10
up.
seconds, huh? You know, I don't really like the time limit, but I understand it. But
Thank
you know
you.
what? 41 years, I left the college level because they're going to change some things. They called me up and went through the motions to hear what I had to say. Okay, then they did what they wanted to anyway. Okay, committees are brought together in high school, elementary, sketch settings.
Mr.
You get-
Donahue,
Yes.
I appreciate your sentiments, sir, and I would love you to email me to expand on those, but we do have to honor our
Well, I will
precedent.
email, because you know what? I'm tired of being in something for 41 years, and nobody wants to listen. And you know what? I'm not a brilliant person, but for 41 years staying in anything, if I don't know something, then I'm a moron, and I don't think I'm a moron.
Jamie Sunner.
Hello, I'm Jamie Sonner. I live at 30432 Oakdale Road. I don't know if I can really follow him. There have been multiple speakers that have come up before me that have been well prepared, have given you all of the facts. They spoke eloquently. There's not much more I can say besides, other than what they've already said. What I can tell you is this pandemic has been awful. It has been destructive on children. My daughter, my youngest, was in kindergarten when we shut down the schools. I had to get a tutor because she couldn't learn how to read watching a computer screen. It was impossible. It cost me thousands, actually, just over $2,000 to get her to the point where she is now, and she's in first grade, and she's still not a very good reader. If you talk to the girl, she's brilliant. She has an amazing mind, but she can communicate well, but she can't write things down. She can't read very well. And this is not my fault per se. I'm just not a very good teacher. It's not the teacher's fault per se. It's the decisions that are made here that are at fault. Closing down schools, forcing masks. My daughter has never misbehaved so much in school other than behind that mask. It's out of control, and we need to make it optional. I don't care what you do with your children. It's your business. Let me do mine. I'll mind my business, you mind yours, and we'll get along a lot better, and all of our children will prosper. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Benjamin Dorr.
My name is Benjamin Dorr. I live at 29338 Oakdale Road in Willowick, Ohio. My two kids all my three kids go to your guys' school district, and I have a 7-year-old son that has a speech impairment. And it really agitates me that last month I went to a conference, or maybe a month and a half ago, and his speech is not getting no better, but how can it get better when he has to constantly wear a mask? And when he goes to speech class, the teacher doesn't even take the mask off to see his mouth move or anything like that. She told me that they have to keep the mask on at all times. How is a kid going to get better to speak if he's got to wear a mask? And why can't the teacher just follow the guidelines and go 6 feet apart and take the mask down? And don't tell me that teachers haven't had their shots. Oh, the kids ain't even had their shots. To deny a kid the right to speak publicly without a mask is totally wrong. I vote it should be removed. And the way it's handled is ridiculous, because another aspect, if a kid has asthma or breathing problems, what I was told that you guys don't even take doctor's notes to try to remove that mask. And what do you do if the kid has asthma and can barely breathe and you tell them to wear a mask? Or what do you do when a kid coughs and they go to the nurse every day and the nurse calls you every day just because a kid coughs? Tell you to come and get your kid because they have symptoms of COVID. This needs to go away, because I'm tired of getting phone calls with that, my work telling me come and get my kids. I'm tired of getting phone calls that they can't understand my son, which is, he's been going to speech class for 2 years, but that's not his mistake. He gets speech classes 4 or 5 times a week. But how you're denying his right? And it's just beyond me. I revolt, it should be removed, because I'm sure I'm not the only one. I'm tired of it. My son is getting tired of it too. He's 7 years old, and now he's even falling more behind, because if he can't speak properly and is not getting what he needs with his IEP status, how can he do other things with the other categories in school? And he's been in special ed his whole life, and it's not getting any better. It's all because of his language. That's all I have to say. Please remove this, because it's hurting kids.
Thank you.
Catherine Catanese.
Hi, I'm a little nervous. I'm Catherine Catanese. I live at 35755 Lakeshore Boulevard, trailer 25. My daughter goes to North High School. She's been there since this year. It's her first year there. And I just wanted to ask you guys to please ban the mask mandate. The only reason why is because it breaks down your immune system, and people with flu and COVID going around, they don't need their immune system breaking down and not working anymore. The mask is preventing that. And I also wanted to let you know that 99.97 survival rates for the COVID. Sorry, I'm nervous. Oh my.
Take your time.
Is 0.03 death rate for the COVID. Never mind. Let me just do it this way. The flu is like COVID now. COVID is outrated. Leave it go. It was a freaking pandemic. It's overrated now. Okay. You got flu now. Flu is taking more lives than COVID. You got the pneumonia and all those other diseases. When you're weak and you're overweight and you're not healthy, you definitely are going to die, whether it's COVID, flu, or anything like that. So I just wanted to make sure that, just to ban it or make it optional, okay? And that's all I have for that. Can I talk about something else, or is that okay? Okay.
That's fine.
The bathrooms at North High School. Okay. My daughter holds her inside, she doesn't go to the bathroom at school. She's afraid to. I used to be that way too. Well, anyways, now with bathrooms shut down because of people smoking pot or whatever it is in the bathrooms, they need to stop that and just put like some kind of security code or detect it right before the kids come in, like some kind of scan to make sure they don't have any drugs or anything. I think that would prevent the bathroom situation. And what else was it? What was on my list?
You get grades?
Huh? Oh, the grades, yes. My daughter had took a test. I don't know who it was, but she took a test, and the points, if you miss one, you miss 6 points. Okay, 6 points is a lot. You miss one question, you're down to a C already, okay? So I figured the grade levels should get at least, maybe 2 or 3 questions, and you'd be good. But 6 for one question, you know what I'm trying to say? Okay, I don't know. You
We
guys-
do.
Okay, all right.
The weight of the score based on the
Yeah.
answer.
So she's down to a C and she only missed one question on her quiz. And I'm trying to think maybe the grades should get a little less strict,
Okay,
And I think that's it. Right?
that's your
Yeah.
time. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
First, I want to thank everyone for allowing everyone to speak and for being respectful. We know this is a highly charged topic. We're now going to move on to item 4, board discussion, our work session regarding the mask mandate. Once again, we need to hear everything that is presented, and we'll ask for just listening during Dr. Thompson's presentation.
Getting started. Well, thank you all for being here, and thank you for being respectful during the public presentations. And I also would like to say that the way the board is handling this situation takes a lot of courage, because they could have had an 8 o'clock meeting, taken no public participation, and taken a vote. So I think that their goal is to be transparent and listen to as many people as we can. My objective is to provide the board with as much data as I can for them to make a difficult decision. So with that being said, so tonight, why are we here? Obviously, we all know we're here to discuss the facial coverings, which current policy says there is a mask mandate across the district. So statute states that boards of education are not able to discuss this business privately. So they have to be out in public, but they certainly don't have to be out in public quite like this. The Lake General Health District has stated that masks can now be optional. That's coming from Ron Graham in the Lake County Health District. According to current Willoughby East Lake Policy 8405.01, decisions made by the Board of Education in August, and masks were required on all campuses. So that requires a policy change. So what steps are required to change policies and protocols? It's determined that a policy is in need of a change or discussion in any Ohio school district, according to law, needs a recommendation that must come from either the superintendent or the treasurer, and it must be placed on a board agenda. In this case, to discuss a change, there must be a recommendation for a change from the superintendent or treasurer to oppose existing policy, which, I'm sure you have read by now, the recommendation and what it says. So, there's current policy, there's masking, social distancing, vaccines, and quarantines. These are things that I'm going to cover. Recommendations from the CDC, the Ohio Department of Health, and the Lake County General Health District, and they do not align. Quarantining protocol changes. There have been, I'm sure most of you are confused about what the quarantining protocols are. If you're not, I would be very surprised, because they change almost weekly. But we'll cover what they are for now. I'll provide the board with the current status of district cases. We also surveyed the staff, and I'll share the results of that. Learning options. What are learning options if someone chooses something other than in-person learning? And masking options. Obviously, what we're here tonight to discuss is the mandate revoked or changed. And then what would be, is there a situation that would bring masks back? So today, during the 21-22 school year, we began the school year as mask optional. cases in Lake County rose, coupled with changes in recommendations from the Lake County General Health District. Ron Grant came to this actual meeting area and recommended masking. Policy states that districts will consider available medical science recommendations set forth by the CDC, U.S. Department of Health, and the Ohio Department of Health, and local departments of health. That's what current policy states. So in August of 21, the Board of Education held a work session with the health department and determined that masks should be mandated. That thus began the mask mandate, probably sometime back in September. So the Lake County General Health District put out a letter on January 28, 2022. The representatives, and this is a quote from the letter, the representatives of the agency understand the desire of parents and members of the community to make wearing a mask and facial coverings an individual choice. So they went on to state that schools could make, or we've always, as someone stated previously, we've always legally been able to do one or the other. It's not a legal issue, rather it's a choice issue. Lake County cases of COVID-19 have decreased. So in December 29, 2021, there were 592 new cases per day. As of January 28th, which is the last data I have, there are 34 new cases per day. A significant decrease. COVID-19 vaccines are readily available for all school-aged children and adults. That's a fairly new phenomenon, especially when you talk about for students. They do say that districts should continue to implement all possible mitigation strategies. So we're not discussing, or I'm not recommending any changes to mitigation policies or protocols that are in place aside from masks. The Ohio Department of Health, to be fair, says universal masking policies reduce the risk of spread. The Ohio Department of Health goes on to say that more students who are wearing masks, the less the virus can spread. Reinforce the importance of mask wearing, physical distancing, improving ventilation, hand washing, coughing etiquette, testing, and stay at home if you are sick. That's what the Ohio Department of Health says. The Centers for Disease Control recommends universal indoor masking by all students ages 2 or older, staff, students, and visitors to K-12 schools, regardless of vaccination status. Between October 21 and January 26, this applied only to students. We're talking now about quarantining protocols, which has been very, very confusing for us. Between October 21 and January 26, 2022, this applied only to students who were exposed to COVID-19 at school. But these changes that I'm going to show you now apply to all exposures in school and out of school. So essentially what they've done is they significantly relaxed who gets quarantined, essentially. Almost no one at this point. Masks to stay, again, in communication from January 26, 2022, direct contacts may remain in the classroom following an exposure if they do the following. And this would still be the protocol in place. That you would wear a mask for 10 days after exposure, self-monitor for symptoms of COVID-19, isolate and get tested if you start to experience symptoms. All students and staff returning to the classroom must follow masking protocols unless they have a medical condition or disability that has been documented by their healthcare provider and it is safe. Test to play. Again, this is not coming from our school board, this is coming from the Ohio Department of Health. Test to play, January 26, 2022. Asymptomatic contacts may continue to participate in extracurricular activities if they do the following, and that is wear a mask and test on initial notification of exposure. So if you're playing a sport, you have no symptom, you take a test, and you're negative, you continue to play athletics. So the Lake County General Health, you can't read it, but that's the full letter. But they recommend continued mitigation strategies to provide the best defense practices. which include hand washing, isolate when diagnosed with COVID-19, and social distancing. They also recommend that masks can now be optional, and school districts are not required to contact trace. However, they must report the numbers of positive cases in the district on a weekly basis. Contact tracing took an enormous amount of time, and if you remember, that's what was swooping up lots of kids and staff members in quarantines initially, was through contact tracing, which we were required to do. School districts are expected to assist with contact tracing in the event of an outbreak in a school setting. So the LCGHD, the Lake County General Health District, recommends frequent hand washing and use of sanitizers. We do that. We have Perel sanitizing stations, disinfecting wipes, and hand sanitizers available throughout all of our schools. Isolate at home when diagnosed with COVID-19 or exhibiting signs of COVID, which of course we do that. Social distancing indoor settings when around others outside of your family circle. To be completely transparent, we socially distance when we can, but that is very, very difficult to socially distance in a building with 1,100 kids when it was built for that number of kids. But that is just not a very realistic thing that you can consistently put somebody 6 feet away. You can do it during the 50-minute classroom period, but class transitions, lunches, before school, after school. So I want to be very clear that that is just, and we've been clear about that from the onset, that it would be very difficult to be all in, which I think we all agree. Regardless of what you think about masks, I think everybody wants their kid in school. So, but to do that and socially distance at 6 feet, it's not possible, not consistently. Thorough cleaning and disinfection of all schools and work and home environments on a routine basis. So our protocols are weekly. We use the Clorox 360 machines, more if we need them. If there's a teacher or a student that has COVID-19 or COVID positive, then we immediately go into those rooms and disinfect, or anywhere that student would have been. And then nightly we sanitize and disinfect all of the surfaces. Follow the Ohio Department of Health guidelines for mask to stay, test to play when a person is identified as a close contact person with COVID-19 in or outside of the school setting, and we continue to do that. So that's a lot. Right now these are updated to exactly what the guidelines say. So if you want to know about masks to stay, test to play, it's on our website. Quarantining's on our website, so it's all there for you. So what do the numbers look like for us right now? So if you look at active student cases on the left column, highlighted in yellow on 1/6/22, we had 135 students that were COVID positive. Today we have 14. Active staff, the height was on 12/29/21. We had 53 staff members. That's when it was right before Christmas break. It was getting very difficult to staff, but we made it through. We now are down to 5. So on 1/6, we had 165 students and staff combined, and we are now down to 19. So we're able to manage at this point. Those are pretty significant drop-offs compared to what we were experiencing about a month ago. How does that compare to the whole county? So these are 0 to 19-year-olds. Total cases were 7,815. The real gist of this that's the most important is you can see the rates significantly declining. Hospitalization rate is 0.91% is the hospitalization rate right now for that age group. And there have been 0 deaths. I think that's the first time I've had anyone clap for me in a very, very long time. I'll take it. I don't think you're actually clapping for me. You're clapping for the numbers, but I was still standing here. So I'll take it. I believe the district should keep the current mask mandate. This was a question posed, not by me, but by union leadership to their staff. So The question was, I believe the district should keep the current mask mandate. I believe it helps create a safer work environment for staff and safer learning environment for students. So this is the responses from WEDA, which is our Teachers Association. Strongly agree with the above statement was 38% of the staff. Agree with the above statement was 11% of the staff. Neutral was 15%. Disagree was 14%, and strongly disagree was 21%. So what it basically comes out to, if you consider neutral people, I don't care, then it's about 50-50. WESEP is our secretarial support staff and various other workers. 52% said they agreed with the statement, 16% or almost 17% neutral, 8.4% disagreed, and 22% strongly disagreed. So that ends up being about 53-47, somewhere in that range. But what it tells you, board, is the staff split, basically.
Are there any other questions?
No, that was the only question. I didn't write it. That was written by the union bosses.
Can you ask them a different question?
I'm not going to.
Well, technically, if neutral was in the middle, it would have been 51 to 35.
Yeah.
So it's heavily,
If it's conducive to their
heavily
educational
weighted.
Well,
on
if you
form.
would just let me finish up. The data's there for you to look at. I'm not trying to sway you. Students continue to, so learning options for students. Students continue to attend in person, obviously is an option. The second option is students can apply for online learning through the Willoughby Eastlake Partner.
What are you gonna do with speech?
Which is,
Oh, I have to just remind, once again, this is a meeting of the board in public, and we have to have opportunity for him to speak. It's not a discussion.
Okay, but you saying all these numbers, well, what are you gonna do with kids that have speech problems?
Once,
Don't wear a mask and tell the teacher to wear a mask when they're talking to them?
sir, I truly appreciate it. You can always email additional questions.
I will, just like that guy is.
Thank you very much. Mr. Thompson?
so students can apply for the online learning at Willoughby Eastlake Partner, which is the Educational Service Center of Western Reserve, and that enrollment period is open until February 18th. So if you're interested in doing that, or anyone watching is interested in doing that, they can contact Robin Hopkins at weschools.org and start that process. So they are prepared to take students if students choose to attend that online learning academy. So what are other Lake County schools doing? Kirtland is now mask optional. Mentor is mask optional. Mayfield indicates that they are strongly looking at a recommendation during the month of February. Wickliffe was non-committal. Fairport Harbor is no change. They've been mask optional all year. Painesville will not change. The mask mandate will remain in place. Riverside's no change. They've been mask optional all year. Perry's mask optional. And Madison is mask optional. The Board of Education determines mask wearing should be optional. What criteria would the board follow to indicate they should reconsider their decision? What my department will do is make sure that let me back up and say, establishing a specific matrix which would cause a trigger to say, the board's gonna reconvene and issue another mask mandate. I think we can learn from the past when we put some of those automatic triggers in to close schools at the very beginning of the pandemic, and that proved to be, it didn't work, only because you're venturing in a territory none of us have been down before. So it's really difficult to gauge what they should be or shouldn't be, because last time there was a pandemic, I wasn't the superintendent. So it's hard to establish those. So, and I know of no other schools that have an established matrix, but what would we rely on is the local health agencies and their guidance. Obviously, we'll continue to monitor COVID every day in our schools, continue to look at the hospitals. Staff illnesses obviously have to be monitored. We have to be able to staff. Who knows what the next variant will be? I don't know. When we're made aware by district administration that there are changes and recommendations from government agencies. So if any of that were to occur, that would begin to potentially jeopardize our ability to continue in-person learning, I would ask for another board meeting and you would have that discussion again. Hopefully we'll never have to go there. That's as much information as I have. Do you have any questions for me?
I do.
Okay.
So it looks like the highest number of cases for students was the week of 1/6. And that's,
And recently.
that was with a mask mandate, so it doesn't appear like it's stopping spread.
Well, what you don't know is you don't know if that number would have been double. I'm just playing devil's advocate. We don't know. So I don't know how that would have been impacted with a mask mandate or not a mask mandate. So I can't really answer that question.
Dr. Thompson, if I may for a second, I would just like to address those in attendance. A lot of you have been here in meetings before, and a lot of individuals are new to our meeting setting, so I just want to clarify something, because I think it's hard to attend a meeting and not know what's going on. At this meeting, we as a board cannot discuss in any capacity the things that are being presented today. This is really the first time that we're getting to discuss this amongst ourselves. Our meetings are scheduled so that we can do that in public, so that you can hear that, so you know what we as board members are discussing, how we're approaching and combating and taking action on things for the district. It's not a discussion, and it can't be. As much as we would want it to be, the setting doesn't allow for it, and it's in Ohio Revised Code and it's in our policy, and we are bound by those as elected officials. So as we continue to discuss amongst ourselves, we are bound, and we have to have a conversation with Dr. Thompson and him with us and us with each other. Please respect that. This is the only way we operate. We don't write these rules, they're given to us, okay? So as we continue, there's gonna be a lot of discussion going on here. This is not a lightly taken issue. And as we discuss, we need to silently listen so that we can conduct the meeting the way that we are required by law to. Thank you. Mrs. Menzer, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I have another question. I believe we talked about it a little bit at the levy meeting, that enrollment of the district has declined significantly. And I think you agreed that one of the top 3 reasons is due to the stringent COVID protocols, that people are leaving because private schools and homeschooling don't have those strict protocols. Would you agree?
I think it's a contributing factor.
Thank you.
Dr. Thompson, turn it towards me. Currently, the after-school program is run by the YMCA.
It is.
What is their policy on masks for the kids in that program?
They currently are following the protocols of the school district, since they're in school district buildings. So currently they have a mask mandate.
Okay. Do we have any kind of data that tells us what population of the student body and teachers are vaccinated?
No, we have no way of knowing that number of population. I can tell you that staff, because we held the vaccination clinic here, large number of staff are vaccinated, but I couldn't tell you who is and who isn't.
Yeah, I'm not looking for specifics of who is. I'm just kind of curious as do we have any idea of what percentage of
I have no idea what the
population.
percentage of students' vaccination rate is. Staff vaccination rates are pretty high.
Okay. Currently, we have in place the mask mandate, and then we have exemptions for parents who wish to not have their kids wear a mask.
Correct.
How are those decisions being made? If
Well-
someone says, I have a reason for my child not to wear a mask, be it religious, be it medical.
There are 2 reasons that drive mask exemptions. The first is a health reason, and that requires a note or a letter from a healthcare provider. That would be an instant automatic exemption as soon as we receive the information. If someone claims a religious exemption, we've been counseled by our attorneys to accept that, which we do, and it's pretty instantaneous.
Currently, there's a federal mandate that says masks have to remain on buses. Do we know what the cleaning protocols for buses are?
Sure, we do. We're issuing are using the same cleaning protocols that we're using in our school, in our classrooms.
Mr. Boxer, just a second. So with that, if the recommendation were to be approved today, students would have to wear a mask on the bus and then would have the option to remove it when they arrive at school?
That is a federal mandate that you do not have the authority to undo.
So right now, if we were to unmask and parents who wanted their children to go virtual, they would have to immediately make that decision by the 18th of February?
That's correct.
In terms of mask to stay?
Mask to stay.
Okay, I am assuming that we are relying on parents to notify us then if their child has been exposed to COVID, since we're not doing the tracing anymore?
Well, we've always, even during tracing wouldn't be triggered without parent notification. So that's always been the process, so that wouldn't change.
I have a question in regards to mask to stay. And I think I just need more clarity to understand. So mask to stay basically says, once exposure has been identified, then regardless of choice, unless through a medical exemption, you would have to wear a mask to remain in school. Otherwise, you would have to go home and virtually learn.
Correct.
Within those parameters.
Correct.
And the only way that we would know for mask to stay is if that student would be subject to that, is if the parent self-reported exposure.
That's correct.
And is that exposure household only, or is it, what does exposure mean? Like,
Well, previous to this latest change, mask to stay only applied to a student who was exposed to another student in a classroom. So Lawrence has COVID, you guys are exposed to him, you're within 6 feet of him, you could stay in school with you masked. But if you were exposed at home, mom, dad, sibling has COVID, and they're COVID positive, anyone in your house that's COVID positive is considered a close contact. So you wouldn't be able to come to school under the old rules if it was an exposure at home. Now, the same rules that apply in school apply at home. That's the change.
But you still have to have a mask.
You would have to mask.
Even so, if we go mask optional in that situation, or that exposure, you still have to come back to school with a mask.
That's right. That's why they're
barring
calling it
exemption.
mask to stay.
Can you still show proof of previous infection within a certain period of time? I know that used to be an exemption to come back without having to stay home. Is that still?
The current policy does not speak to natural immunity or vaccination status.
is there anything within there for, and once again, I'm just asking just to really understand this, are we asking for the child to be tested at all anymore, or to show a negative result with that exposure?
The quarantine guidelines don't call for that. Again, please remember, we didn't write it. It's just imposed upon us.
Well, along those lines, then, my son's on the wrestling team. He was in a direct contact with a COVID positive wrestler. He had to go home and I'm sorry. My son is on the wrestling team. He was in a close contact with a COVID positive case, and He was told to go home, but he had the ability to get a test. He tested, and then he was back the next day or whatever. So
Yeah, that's test to play.
test to play.
So in order to stay in athletics and in the classroom are two separate issues. So there's test to play, mask to stay. So if it were a school situation, he would have to mask to stay in school, but if he still wanted to continue to wrestle, he has to test once, not twice now. Last week it was twice, now it's once.
What type of COVID test are we requiring for that test to play?
That's what
It's unspecified.
So it could be like an at-home and/or the PCR, whatever.
They still have to, there's a website that watches you as you take the test. They have to go through that process. I don't know if anybody's experienced that. But there's a website, you call a number or you log on, and I don't know if what their medical background is, but there's a person there who walks you through how to use the kit, and then they watch you, and then you leave the test, and then where they can view it, and then 15 minutes later you hold it up, and they determine if it's a COVID positive or negative. And then they send you basically a certificate that you turn back into the school.
It's like a virtual doctor's appointment.
Basically, it's a virtual nurse or virtual aide or virtual, I don't know. But yes, it's a virtual appointment.
Do any of our athletic departments have access to tests they can give to
We have
players?
We have some.
Like everyone else, some,
Yeah,
but not,
yes.
not readily.
Right.
Okay. Dr. Thompson, you mentioned none of the protocols, other than potentially the demasking, would impact, would be changed, like the disinfectant and the Clorox and the sanitization. Do you have any approximate, those are things you weren't doing pre-COVID?
Correct.
Any ballpark figure on, do we budget that? How do, is that, I'm sure that's an extra expense, worthy one, of course, but is that any ballpark on what that might be? I didn't mean to put you on the spot, I was just thinking.
I'd have to get back to you on that
Okay.
exact figure.
Okay. But it's not changing in this,
No, we
Go
will
for it.
continue every protocol that's been in place from the onset is still in place, with the exception of whatever protocols change from the CDC or the Ohio Department of Health in terms of quarantining. Obviously, lots of changes there, and then the recommendation to take the masks off.
So one of our participants tonight, I think, made a good point in, I personally get a call from the nurse's office often for my daughter. It is not COVID related, but there are many symptoms that are COVID related. So with a mask optional environment, still in the middle of cold and flu season, so we're going to be able to see the signs of illness more readily, and also they're going to be coughing openly. So they're going to be going to the nurse's office more. And how are we as a district prepared to deal with that with a mask optional situation and having more and more parents called because their children exhibit symptoms, which is basically every symptom known to man?
Right. I think those are just some of the things we're going to have to work our way through, because certainly people are more heightened and aware and concerned, some people more than others, but concerned if someone were to cough near them or have a runny nose, which is, all of those things are gonna happen. Obviously, it doesn't mean you have COVID, but what we would ask is parents, if your child is sick, keep them home. Keep them home. Use common sense, keep them home. And then when they're done with their nose running and wiping it on their sleeves and all the things little kids do, and well, big kids do too, but then come back to school. Obviously, if a student is exhibiting coughing and running nose and potential fever, just like we would pre-COVID, we would send them to the nurse, and parents would come and pick them up. So the people might be more sensitive to it now, but we have a nurse or a health aide in every building, and we're prepared for that. We've been dealing with that since the onset of COVID.
So with the communicable disease chart that's in every educational setting, the nurse is instructed that based upon symptoms present when calling the parent to send them home, that they are to provide instructions for return to school. And those instructions specifically state if it requires a doctor's note to return and or to be symptom-free for X period of time. So how are we handled to prepare that in relation to COVID when it doesn't currently exist on that chart?
Well, COVID, if it's COVID and they're COVID positive, then there are quarantine guidelines, which are on our website.
So those would kick in.
Those would kick in, right, if they were positive.
And then with other disease on the communicable disease chart, we indicate that in the event that it is easily spread, that we sometimes notify classrooms, like lice, also to like strep, your child has been exposed. Is that something, because we're not contact tracing, so how are we going to do that when it's not on the chart explicitly stating how to do that?
Well, we do have thresholds. So for example, if one student has lice, that doesn't trigger notification, but off the top of my head, I couldn't give you the exact trigger point, but there are trigger points for flu, lice, et cetera, of cases in a classroom that would constitute an outbreak. And once it constitutes an outbreak, then notification is sent out. Could be the entire grade level or the entire building, depending on how extensive it is.
I think that brings me to the next point. So, I mean, obviously with masking, and everybody has their own views, I want to make sure we explore all of them. How are we going to identify if and when, if we're mask optional, if to quarantine a classroom, to quarantine a grade, or to quarantine a building? Or to go virtual, rather. I'm sorry to use language.
Well, what's been there would be two factors, but the number one driver is staffing. So if we find ourselves unable to staff, again, the same protocols I laid out, was it in January?
Yes.
Would remain exactly the same. That we would start by a classroom first, grade level next. If we had to close a building, we would, but only for very temporary time periods. If staffing became so stressed at the next stage, then we would close our high schools and middle schools and keep our elementaries open and send all our available subs to the elementary to keep them open. Just because I think we all, like, online learning, I'll clue you in. No, I'm teasing, I shouldn't joke, I'm sorry. Online learning doesn't work, not very well. Not very well. I mean, it's better than nothing. If that's what we're forced to do, it's better than nothing. But it's, for most kids, well, for some kids it works great, but for most kids it's fairly ineffective. We have the data to easily show that from the incredible drop in grade point averages during the time that we were online. So it wasn't effective, but it's even more impactful on elementary students and families than it is in middle school and high school. High school students can at least, there's some expectation that they can work independently. A first grader doesn't work independently, or not very well. So, and can't be left at home alone. So if you have a single mom or two working people, so our goal would be to put all available resources to keep our elementaries open. So none of that would change. If there's a new variant that comes along and it starts wiping through our staff again, and I know that there's a lot of strong opinions that masks work, masks don't work. You know, I'm not a scientist. I'm not here to tell you they work or they don't work, but I would at least ask for the conversation and the data to show you, and you can make a decision about whether we want to put other mitigations back in place or not.
I think one of the, I appreciate everyone's attendance tonight, I truly do. We also had a very engaged email correspondence with the community when notification went out, and a large majority of those communications were in favor of keeping the mandate, mostly for the very real concern that virtual learning doesn't work. So I feel that we're all in agreement, regardless of where we stand on the issue, that virtual learning is not advantageous.
Agreed.
So I guess with that being said, science aside, and I agree with Dr. Thompson, I think all of us up here agree, none of us are doctors or qualified medical professionals. But at the same time, there is a consensus and there's conversation in the community, and a large portion of that says that if we remove masks, that we increase the probability of going virtual. So with that being said, that would be, proofs in the pudding, right? If we went mask optional. What do we have in place with our teachers to transition them to virtual so that it's a smooth and potentially needed process?
Well, what we have now, which is even there'll be presentations this spring about moving to one-to-one next year. So one-to-one meaning Chromebook for every student. So that would certainly help in transition. Our teachers know how to use Schoology. When you consider that our teachers back in March of 2020 had about, there's got to be a teacher out here. What do we have? 2 days notice? Yeah, 2 days notice. 2 days notice to go virtual and transition using a software package that most of them had never seen or used before. And so I really do believe our teachers did amazing work under the circumstances. It's just incredibly difficult circumstances, but we could quickly transition back. So for example, we have the machines, we're ready to go. They're numbered, they're already moved out to distribution areas within the schools. So if we had to, we would need 1 day to pass out the Chromebooks, and the next day we'd be live on Schoology. But that's the absolute, in my view, the worst case scenario.
But you're in a much better place now than we were 2 years ago in terms of affecting that process.
Oh, yeah,
Being prepared.
considerably
Being
better
prepared for it.
position than we were 2 years ago, for sure, yeah, absolutely.
With regard to the teachers and going virtual, I know in the beginning of the year, there was a memorandum of understanding and some conversation had between the district and the union on how to handle virtual learning with
Right.
regards to their contract.
Right.
What conversations have been had with the union in the event that was there any ongoing discussion, or are we going to have to overcome any issues in the event that virtual would need to be entertained?
No, because if we were to go completely virtual, then there's no union issue. That becomes their job. I'm not saying that's easier or harder. It's probably harder, actually, to transition. I think most teachers would say that. But the union agreement that we struck at the beginning of the year was for the teacher that would have, say, 5 kids learning virtually and 20 in the classroom still. So now they're doing both online and in person, and that's why they receive some additional compensation.
And they've done a wonderful job. I just want to say publicly to every person who works for our district, I applaud the last 2 years, absolutely. I do not want to that, but if we had to, I think we need to be prepared. That's the conversations that we need to have today, is explore any and all options, because I feel that's our job as board members.
I really do believe that our teachers are as prepared as they can be if we need to go virtual. I just certainly hope that we do not need to go virtual. But I can't, I don't have a crystal ball.
I would go back with Mr. Boxler. I think someone in the audience mentioned exemptions. Is there, based on your understanding, is there the process for getting one? Is it online? Is it clear to the school administrator how to
Yeah.
execute it?
Yeah, it's just it's simply one form. You don't even have to. So, for example, there's a menu choice. You check a box and you turn it back into your school. That's all that's required.
And then, so I understand. So masks, regardless of what the outcome of this decision, the masks stay on if you're on a bus.
That is a federal mandate that you do not have the authority to remove.
Okay.
And the problem with that is it's a violation of the federal statute. Now, how I've yet to see the masked police pull over a bus, but nonetheless, that's a federal statute.
Understand.
So, Dr. Thompson, one of the things, and I just want to clarify to the community that we received a lot of emails, and we did our due diligence to respond to each and every one. I think there's a few that came through tonight that we were unable, just in timing, to respond to. And a lot of individuals, I had been responding to all of them on behalf of the board, as is the precedent of the board, but I want to let everyone know that every email was read and shared with every member of the board, including Dr. Thompson. A lot of them made reference to the protocol changes from the Lake County Health District, from Ron Graham, in which it indicates that they recommend masks can now be optional. My question is, and I think this might be a general frustration, it might be an assumption on my part, but it's my position that the community is exhausted with the constant yo-yo changes from the local health department and the Ohio Department of Health and the CDC, and it's very hard to understand where we're going and if we'll ever go backwards. So I guess with your conversations with Ron Graham, under what conditions, in the event that mask optional was voted on today and implemented, would a mask mandate, what thresholds are we looking at to reconsider it? Or is it just kind of whenever the wind goes that direction?
Well, the matrix that was used from the very beginning was how many out of 100,000 people would be infected. Initially, the number, when we started the whole process, was 100 out of 100,000 people. And then that number seemed really high when the pandemic started. And then shortly thereafter, it was times 8. At different points, it's been 800, 900 per 100,000. So your guess is as good as mine. I really don't feel like I have the expertise to sit here and tell you what that threshold should be. I don't know. From my perspective, are we seeing large number of students absent? In other words, are we doubling our absentee rate, and are we unable to staff? Those are my triggers.
Okay. What other questions do we have? Mr. Oscos, I wanted to make sure you have an opportunity.
I think you've covered it.
Thank you. I think amongst the board, and obviously Dr. Thompson, thank you for letting us do a firing squad towards you.
Can I sit down?
No, sorry, no, of course. Yes, please.
Okay, down.
I think, yes, definitely. As a board, one of the things that we don't get an opportunity to do is to talk amongst ourselves when we are not in a public setting. So once again, we need to engage each other and have a conversation here amongst ourselves. Please be patient with us. We're not trying to drag this on. It's just a very important issue. So as a board, I understand the recommendation. I'm definitely seeing both sides of it. And ultimately, I think some things that really stuck out to me in our emails, and if we could maybe kind of reflect on some of those for discussion right now. There was many emails that made mention to medically compromised students who rely upon the masks to keep them safe for a variety of reasons. Oh, is it not? Can you not hear me? So with the medically compromised students, that was a concern from a lot of parents. At the same time, I definitely hear today, I myself suffer from a speech impediment as a child, and I still today, when I speak quickly, stutter. So I completely understand the importance of needing to see to facilitate learning and speech. So we have two sides of the same coin, where some students need a mask, some students need masks off. I'm very torn. And I think what I'm torn with specifically is the immediacy of the recommendation, which if it went into effect tomorrow would place students who are medically compromised, who rely upon a mask mandate, who've been attending school with a mask mandate, to not have that anymore.
Well,
So,
you
what are your thoughts as a board?
We'll always have the option to wear the mask, right?
They would, yes.
And based on today's data, Willoughby East Lake City Schools would be the, what, other than one? And the Lake County would be the only one that would keep the mask mandate. So everyone else already has gone optional.
Yeah. Well,
And I think correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Thompson, but Mentor went mask optional on the superintendents. They did not seek, there was no board, Mentor schools did not have this forum for this discussion.
That's correct.
I'm unsure of what communications were had with the district, with parents prior to that decision being made. You know, was there any communication to the families to let them know, hey, this is what's going on?
I really can't speak to what Mentor did or didn't do.
Well, and I think that's the thing, is we are Willoughby East Lake, we are our own district, we have our own unique community to consider in decision-making. And I think with the mask optional, to be considerate of all families, to go mask optional, to use Madison as an example, they went mask optional, and with their vote, they put out a future date that which allowed families to make decisions for their students to either pull them to go virtual and or to potentially vaccinate if they weren't vaccinating, et cetera, and it gave time for them to make a choice for their child while still going with mask optional for the other families who felt that it needed to occur.
So what you're suggesting then is to go mask optional in a future date to allow planning?
So we have Dr. Thompson, one of the emails that we received was in regards to the fact that students couldn't poll to go virtual if a mask optional were to be voted on. And you very kindly spoke with the ESC, and they extended their deadline to February 18th.
Correct.
So,
But this recommendation, to be clear, is effective immediately.
Correct.
and that gives, families would then have 2 weeks to, or make care, if they really felt that a mask optional was detrimental to their child's safety and health, it would give them time to make arrangements with, enroll, go through that process before the mask optional would go into place. And I feel that that consideration takes both sides of the situation into consideration. And I think back to when we went mask mandated in the fall, it was like a light switch. And one of the things that we didn't do was, and we're improving upon, is our communication is clearly articulate what and how families who needed or wanted exemptions could pursue them. And had that been done initially, families could have, by choice or need, filed for that exemption. But that was kind of a muddy process. And
thought it was suspended.
And then what
Based
I
on
think
your
what we
exemption.
need to do
Madam
is-
President, point of
Not
privilege.
wearing a mask and had to be
Point of
suspended.
privilege, sir.
Sir, we have to remain quiet or you'll have to leave the meeting. So once again, to improve as a district and to really hear all the community members and to ensure that moving forward, when we make decisions, we are making them to ensure that all students and families have options, and those options are properly articulated. It's just kind of where I'm going right now. I understand the mask optional, and I also understand families who need masks to stay or perceive masks needing to stay. What are your thoughts as a board?
I feel the same way. I also think the state made a mistake in allowing school boards to have to make a health decision.
I agree
would like the
100%.
state
This
to
should have been
vote
with
for it.
our Board of Health. Thank you, John.
Yeah, let the parents do it.
I'll just, once again, we are considering very seriously the mask optional.
Tell people to take a shot. That's all you need to do.
Sir, is it
Point.
Mr. Dorr? Mr. Dorr, I truly appreciate you right now, but we have to remain in order. It is not a discussion.
Sorry, I'm speaking the truth.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So, we're getting there. So, what are your thoughts?
I think without a doubt, this is a tough decision. You know, I can see both sides of this coin. We literally have a split. 50% of the teachers say they'd rather have the masks off. Based on the emails that we're getting, 50% of the parents want to go mask optional, 50% don't. This is a tough decision. Excuse me. I'm going to call point of privilege again. Okay? This is our time to discuss.
If we need to, we can always take a recess.
I'm leaving, excuse me, sorry. But just remember, each and every one of you is an elected official. Elected official.
Thank you.
In several of the emails that we received from the people who wanted to keep the mask mandate. You know, I know that we have a lot of people that showed up today that spoke, hey, they wanted, you know, parents' option, parents' option. We have a lot of the emails from the parents who said, we want to keep the mask mandate. They said that they were afraid to come to the meeting. Excuse me, that's what I'm talking about right there.
Mr. Boxler, please address me. Okay.
They were afraid to come to the meeting because of intimidation by people in the audience.
Well, I feel, once again, this is a highly charged issue. I don't want to make it more charged, but once again, as a board member, we're just exploring all options, as we should every time we address any issue. Thank you, Mr. Boxler. Mr. Lawrence, what are your thoughts about it?
Honestly, I think we've talked a lot. I think I like the passion that people brought to this room. I also read those emails on both sides. There's data to support both, quite frankly, but it's been over 2 years trying to work through this, and March 2020 is different than March 2022 at this point, in my mind.
Okay.
So I'm ready to vote.
Okay. Mrs. Menzer?
I also respect everyone's opinion. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. And we may disagree on issues, but we can all agree that everybody here cares about our children's future.
Agreed, 100%. So before we transition out of board discussion, I guess let me make sure I stay organized here. There we go. Before we move on to the resolution, which is the last item today, we have 2 options to continue with the resolution as it is, or to potentially amend the resolution to go mask optional, but with a slightly future date to accommodate the virtual learning enrollment option. So I'm going to make a motion to amend the resolution to state mask optional with an effective date of February 21st. Do I hear a motion to second that?
Madam President, I would make a motion to second that.
Okay. So with that, it's open for discussion. So Nick, I'm going to lean on you right now to help out. So go ahead.
Who's calling the motion? You're calling the motion?
I'll call the motion.
To be clear, this is a vote on changing the date. So if you like immediate, you would vote no. If you're in favor of February 21st, you would vote yes. And then we would then vote on the resolution with whatever date that you guys chose. So I just want to make clear what we're voting on.
Okay. So we're in the discussion portion, technically.
Yeah.
Is there any discussion about the amendment, right?
No, that's why I said I just want to make
Okay.
clear of what you guys are discussing and
Yep.
what you would be voting on.
So we're gonna vote on my proposed amendment to Resolution 5A, right? To state that it would be effective February 21st. Okay. Mr. Tarnello?
Mr. Boxler?
Yes.
Wait, did you get a second? Do you need a second?
Oh, I was the initial and
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
Mr. Boxler?
Yes.
Mr. Roskis?
Yes.
Mr. Vittori?
No.
Mrs. Menser?
No.
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Passes 3-2.
That would take us to item 5A, our resolution, which is now a resolution to go mask optional effective February 21st. Did I do that correctly? Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve Resolution 5A, optional mask wearing effective February 21st?
Mrs. Bear, I would make a motion to approve Resolution 5A, making masks optional, starting February 21st.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Menzer. The floor is open for discussion to the new resolution, which would make mask optional effective February 21st. At this point, is there any discussion, or would any board member like to make a statement to the community prior to voting on said resolution?
So what's up with the February 21st date? What's the basis for February 21st?
So ultimately, it would allow families who feel mask optional is detrimental to their student to withdraw them and to meet the deadline date of February 18th to enroll in virtual learning. And then after that deadline, all students would be able to be mask optional, giving families time to transition their child to virtual learning if they felt that mask optional wasn't conducive. That's all. I'm trying to strike a middle ground here and give all sides an option to do what they feel is right for their child.
And if that motion doesn't pass, then what happens?
If you vote no, the mandate stays in place. So your options are optional on the 21st, or the mandate remains in place.
So when the motion is put,
So right now, at this moment, effective immediately is off the table.
That was just voted on, and it failed, or it lost 3-2, or it passed 3-2.
other discussion?
Madam President, no matter which way you look at this, this is a tough decision. And to ask boards of education to make these kind of decisions, I agree with Mr. Roskis. That's just ridiculous. I feel really, it is a tough decision no matter which way. I think that at least this way we're splitting the difference. People who want parents to have the option, starting on the 21st, they're going to have that. It makes absolute sense.
Thank you, Mr. Boxler. Any other discussion or comments? I did just want to make a quick statement on behalf of myself as a board member. This was an extremely eye-opening and wonderful experience, and I say that without sarcasm. I feel the mask issue is one that is extremely divisive in nature, or perceived to be so. But what I've seen over the last week is to have the Willoughby Eastlake community come together with one voice discussing one thing. Although we have different opinions on how to handle the situation, the level of care, respect, articulation, the evidence that both sides provided, I truly see a body of parents and community members that honestly care for their children. And mask optional aligns with something that I personally believe in. You know your child, we may know children, but we have to find a common ground. And I definitely see our community coming together just in different ways, and I want to encourage this engagement in the future. We need to hear your voices and your opinions. We may not always agree, but a common conversation is what we need to have to move forward and to support all children and our students, our teachers in the district. And I appreciate that level of engagement, and I just want to thank you. I also wanted to thank the rest of the board and Dr. Thompson for being so collaborative over the last week. With that said, I think discussion done. Mr. Tarnello, please take a roll.
Mr. Boxler?
Yes.
Mr. Roskis?
Yes.
Mr. Vittori?
Yes.
Mrs. Menser?
Yes.
Mrs. Bear?
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
Okay, we now move to item 6, closing for adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Madam President, I'll make a big motion to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Vittori. Do I hear a second?
I'll make a second big motion.
Thank you, Mrs. Menzer. Thank you to everyone. Meeting adjourned at 8:40. Have a good night.